I think design thinking is going to matter a whole lot more in the future than it does even now. And the reason I hold that belief is if you just look at how much design as a field has undergone a transformation. Only maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago, it used to be a very operational field. And even now, there are many parts of the field that are still fairly operational. And by operational, I don't mean that people do simple things or that do not need expertise. It's just that they aren't the people to make the big decisions. The decision makers used to come to designers and then ask them to make something for them, such as a camera or a printer or a minimally invasive surgical device or what have you. And what occurred in the last 10 years was, for a number of reasons, designers articulated why their thinking was different from other modes of thinking. So design thinking emerged as a modality of thinking or a whole rubric that was so different from business or engineering or all of the dominant fields that it was worth paying attention to, but it was worth paying attention to also because of the implications of the kind of outcomes that this mode of thinking was capable of. And so then this whole notion of design thinking gained ground. The business world found it interesting and relevant, and that was because there was a period of time where the large Western corporations, the big companies in the West, felt the immediate need for innovation because they saw economies like China and India climbing up the value chain and coming after their lunch. And meanwhile had the simultaneous and somewhat somewhat awkward realization that these organizations, the big ones, had grown in ways that had systematically disincentivized innovation from within their own ranks. And so it's not that they were populated by people who were not innovative. It's just that the organizational systems did not allow people to be innovative. What came to pass is that the design community that used to do very operational work started doing much more strategic work and started working on questions that were very ill-defined, where defining the problem side of the equation was probably more important than just solving the problems, because the world is surfeit with people who know how to solve a problem and have the technical prowess to solve a problem once it's framed correctly. But framing a problem correctly in a very complex and ill-defined scenario is a very hard thing to do, and yet come up with a simple thing. From where I stand, I look at a world which is at a very, very tense moment in the history of its in its entire history, facing a future which promises to bring great turbulence and big questions that our dominant fields have very few answers for. And it almost seems as if a lot of our dominant fields, engineering and business and science and so on, are very, very good at working within their own rubrics. The unfortunate thing is that the characterization of the challenges facing us don't quite fall neatly in those rubrics. So the characterization of the challenge, if you do stop to think about it, are extremely interlaced with lots of feedback loops, with lots of different forces playing off each other, and in a very dynamic way, with some changes taking place at a rate that should concern all of us. I think the example that you mentioned, Apple, is a subset of what I'm trying to say. What Apple is at some level a technology company. It makes advanced technology of all sorts, but if you hold it in contrast with other companies that are in the business of doing computation-related things, their sensibilities are very, very different. They realize that the technology parts of it, while they might need a lot of care in order to build, a computer that thin, it takes a lot of care and a lot of engineering prowess to be able to do that. But the decision to make it that thin actually is based on understanding humans. And the humans are the more complex moving parts, that if you understand the motivational frames and even being able to guide how they think, creating memes that did not exist before, but guiding entire cultures into asking a certain set of, making a certain set of demands that you are in a position to deliver on, whereas others are not, is a pretty interesting play to make. There are completely other ways of looking at technology. You can craft futures in terms of completely new experiences and business ecosystems that nobody had seen, highly innovative, highly satisfying experiences that can then drive what the technology is supposed to do in very, very seamless ways. That is one kind of thinking, but that same kind of thinking can then be applied to a much broader diversity of challenges, and other rubrics and other fields can be brought into the mix. So it's not just the understanding of humans, but maybe understanding of larger systems out there, or understanding of how economies grow, or how technology is diffused. And there are lots of communities that understand these things and have made it their business to understand that. But though that understanding doesn't necessarily fall in and get used at a time when you're really innovating complex systems. And so that's what I'm interested in doing. I would say that that's entirely true. I see early signs of a new playing field. I think that there's going to be a certain kind of innovation that we are seeing. For example, Zipcar involves cars, and cars have been a sociological artifact for a long time, right? We understand, we've had a sense of what cars are and how they fit into our lives and how we use them, etc., right? And we've had such a strong sense, at least in this country, that cars are something you own, and it gives you a level of flexibility if you own them. And a company like Zipcar comes and essentially asks the fundamental question about ownership of cars, and essentially turns that on its head. Now, if you speak to someone who's used to using cars for a long time, and they're extremely wedded to the notion of owning cars, and also their identity is based on which car they own, etc., they would be very reluctant to go into a model where suddenly you don't own a car and you engage in this multi-car time kind of sliced way of interacting with them. But if you speak to someone like a 19-year-old, they think I'd be crazy to own a car. Why would you, they ask me questions such as, why would you want to own one car when you can have a fleet of 200? Where if you're picking up a piece of 2x4 from Home Depot, you go with a pickup truck, and when you have a hot date, you have a smart car, and if it's a nice day, you have a convertible. Why would you want to own one car when you have equal access to everything? And I think that Zipcar is not a huge company, but it is actually changing culture. It's an indication and a symptom of a change that's occurring. And I think we are already on our way to finding really good business cases or business models for a post-resource consumption-based economy. And that's a very important shift that we not only need to embark on, but it's not only altruism that's driving it. It's a sense that that's something that needs to happen. That's where the action is going to shift. The people who get that thinking earlier are going to be left with a competitive advantage, and there's very good business to be had. I think change has become constant, and cultures need a certain amount of time to adapt to new innovations. just as you're getting comfortable with one thing, the carpet gets stripped, gets pulled from under you and something else is handed to you, has the effect of stripping cultures of a certain sense of groundedness and meaning. And that void has been growing even at the same time as we congratulate ourselves on how advanced our technologies are and how impressive and sophisticated our technologies are. There has been, I think, a collective sense in an ebbing of how connected we feel to our deeper selves, etc. We believe that having endless choices somehow is a better thing, but if you look at our lives, meaning if, in some ways they are rendered impoverished. And I think that the next era of services actually is going to respond to that void and going to start restoring some of that and creating meaning. A few things we notice with the Googles and the Facebook are that you can have a startup that can come from nowhere and become a force to reckon with, and it can change behavior profoundly, where suddenly you assume that everybody is on it. What these companies are showing is that they grow possibilities like neural nets. They get so many other agencies hooked into their own systems that there's a certain stability that is created just by that having happened. If one fails, something else takes its place. So they're extremely, at some level, they're infrastructural plays without the scaling limitations of traditional infrastructure. The interesting thing I think companies are finding is that the entire way in which things were sold and marketed, the rules are changing. There used to be a time you could control your audience's mind with how you marketed, and now they are making up their minds for themselves. They are much more geared to gauging a company's what they feel about a company based on what they see of their actions rather than what they see of their claims. And so that changes the game. What I'm doing here is trying to create disciplines that have epistemologies that draws from other different disciplines. And it fits together disciplines a little bit like jigsaw puzzles in terms of a larger challenge. So you, instead of taking a discipline and say what is the logical advancement for that, you actually invert it and you say this is the nature of the challenge. Let's figure out what the scale and the dimensions of the challenge are, and let's fit a set of strategic disciplines around it with their practices and figure out how we can strategize around that. So what that buys you is a license to look at complex situations in ways that can escape the traditional frames in which you look at from your traditional disciplinary lenses, and you get what I call a disciplinary parallax. You look at it from two different angles, and you can go beyond the plane in which you're used to looking and discern something that it might have extra dimensions that you become aware of only because you're having the discourse that allows you to look at it from the other discipline's point of view. But it's not just the observation that's important. You start innovating in that space. And so that's what I'm doing right now. And what that also buys you is it is this kind of a game is a little bit like putting a tuning fork out, and people who are made nervous with the thought of stepping outside their own rubrics kind of shy away from it and step back, and people who are very excited about the possibilities step forward. And so it's a very, very good way of identifying who are the people who have the vision and the appetite to play this game. Because it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm not saying that this is the only game. You need deep expertise in disciplines as well, and we draw upon that as well. But it's a very good way of creating a community of people who care about large-scale transformations.